The moment Sienna Cole walked into that executive office, her blood turned to ice. The man behind the mahogany desk, the billionaire CEO she was supposed to impress, wasn't a stranger at all. He was the reckless one-night encounter she'd been trying to forget. The man whose kiss had unraveled her completely just 12 hours ago. Adrian Voss, her new boss. And from the dangerous glint in his eyes, he remembered everything. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The bass thundered through Sienna's chest like a second heartbeat, rattling her ribs in a way that felt almost punishing. She stood at the edge of the rooftop bar. Manhattan sprawled beneath her in a grid of lights that seemed to mock how small she felt. 26 years old and drowning. That's what it came down to. Her bank account was 3 digits away from zero. Her student loans were multiplying like rabbits, and the eviction notice taped to her apartment door this morning had been the final punctuation mark on the worst month of her life. She shouldn't have come out tonight. She should have been home, updating her resume for the 100th time, practicing interview answers in the mirror until her face went numb. But Rachel had dragged her here with promises of free drinks and the kind of temporary amnesia only a Friday night in the city could provide. "You're doing that thing again," Rachel said, appearing at her elbow with 2 cocktails that looked expensive and tasted like regret. "The staring into the void thing. Stop it. You're scaring the men." Sienna took the drink without looking at her. "Good. I'm not here for men." "You're not here for anything. You're a ghost." Rachel clinked their glasses together with unnecessary force. "Drink, forget, repeat. Doctor's orders." "You're a marketing analyst, not a doctor." "Same principles apply. Now drink before I make you dance." Sienna drank. The alcohol burned down her throat, sharp and unforgiving, exactly what she needed. Around them, beautiful people in clothes that cost more than her rent laughed and posed and pretended their lives were perfect. She hated them. She hated herself for being here. She hated that tomorrow she had an interview for a position she was underqualified for at a company she'd researched obsessively for 2 weeks, and she still felt like an imposter who'd accidentally wandered into someone else's life. "I should go," Sienna said, setting down the half-empty glass. Rachel grabbed her wrist. "Absolutely not. We just got here." "You just got here? I've been miserable for 20 minutes. "Then you're right on schedule. Give it another hour, and you'll either be having fun or making out with a stranger. Either way, it's an improvement." Sienna pulled her hand free but didn't move toward the exit. The truth was, she had nowhere better to be. Her apartment was a shoebox with faulty heating and a neighbor who practiced drums at 2 in the morning. Going home meant staring at her ceiling, calculating how many more days she could survive before everything collapsed completely. "One more drink," she said finally. "Then I'm leaving." Rachel grinned. "That's my girl." But Rachel got distracted by some guy in a suit who looked like he collected watches and opinions about cryptocurrency, and Sienna found herself alone again, nursing her second drink and watching the crowd. The music shifted to something slower, more deliberate. People paired off, swaying in that awkward way drunk people do when they're pretending to be smooth. That's when she saw him. He stood across the rooftop, half in shadow, watching the city like he owned it. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a black shirt that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. He wasn't dancing, wasn't drinking, just standing there with the kind of stillness that felt dangerous, like a wolf deciding whether to approach or walk away. And then his eyes found hers. Sienna's breath caught. She should have looked away, should have turned around, found Rachel, made some excuse about needing to leave. But she didn't. She held his gaze, feeling something reckless and stupid wake up inside her chest. He moved toward her, not fast, not slow, just inevitable, like gravity pulling them together. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he said when he reached her. His voice was low, controlled, with an edge that made her spine straighten. Up close, he was even more devastating. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her, the kind of face that belonged on billboards or wanted posters. "That obvious," Sienna said, surprised her voice came out steady. "Only to someone paying attention. And you were paying attention." The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "I was." She should have walked away. Every rational cell in her body screamed at her to walk away. But rationality had gotten her exactly nowhere. Rationality had left her broke, desperate, and standing on a rooftop in a dress she'd bought on sale 3 years ago, pretending she belonged in a world that didn't want her. "I'm Sienna," she said. He extended his hand. "Adrian." His grip was firm, warm, and lasted a second longer than necessary. When he released her, she felt the absence like a door closing. "Just Adrian?" she asked. "For tonight." There was a weight to those words, a suggestion of something deliberately left unsaid. Sienna recognized the game. Mystery, intrigue, the illusion of danger without real consequences. She'd played it before, usually with disappointing results, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe it was the way Adrian looked at her like she was the only person on the entire rooftop worth his time. "Dance with me," he said. Not a question. A statement. Sienna set down her drink. "I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I." He led her to the center of the floor, one hand settling on her waist, the other taking hers. The music was something slow and unnamed, all bass and atmosphere. Around them, other couples swayed, but Sienna barely noticed. All her attention had narrowed to the man in front of her, the heat of his hand through the thin fabric of her dress, the way he moved like someone who'd never been uncertain about anything in his life. "So what brings you here?" Adrian asked, his mouth close to her ear. "Bad decisions and a friend who won't take no for an answer." "Sounds familiar." "You make a lot of bad decisions?" "Only the interesting ones." Sienna laughed, surprising herself. When was the last time she'd laughed? Actually laughed, not the polite customer service version she'd perfected over years of retail jobs and office internships. "What about you?" she asked. "What's your excuse?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I needed to disappear for a few hours." "From what?" "Everything." There was something raw in his voice, a crack in the controlled facade. Sienna felt it resonate in her chest, recognition settling between them like a shared secret. "I get that," she said softly. They danced without speaking after that, the silence more comfortable than it should have been between strangers. Sienna let herself forget. Forget the interview tomorrow. Forget the eviction notice. Forget every failure that had led her to this moment. For these few minutes, she was just a girl dancing with a beautiful stranger on a rooftop in Manhattan, and that was enough. When the song ended, Adrian didn't let go immediately. His hand remained on her waist, thumb tracing a small circle against her hip that sent electricity through her entire body. "Come with me," he said. Every warning bell in Sienna's head went off at once. This was how bad decisions happened. This was how girls ended up as statistics, cautionary tales their friends told at brunch. But she was so tired of being careful, so tired of doing everything right and ending up with nothing to show for it. "Where?" she asked. Adrian's smile was dangerous. "Does it matter?" It shouldn't. It absolutely shouldn't. But somehow, standing there with his hand on her waist and the city lights blurring around them, Sienna found herself nodding. He led her through the crowd, past Rachel, who was too busy with cryptocurrency guy to notice, toward a door marked private. Adrian didn't hesitate, just pushed it open like he owned the place. Maybe he did. Sienna wouldn't have been surprised. The door led to a quieter section of the rooftop, away from the music and the crowd. Up here, the city felt closer, more real. The wind was sharper, carrying the smell of exhaust and expensive perfume. "Better?" Adrian asked. Sienna walked to the edge, gripping the railing. From this height, Manhattan looked almost manageable, like something she could hold in her hands instead of something that was crushing her. "Much better." Adrian came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel awkward. It felt like relief. "Can I ask you something?" Sienna said, finally. "Depends on the question." "Why me? There are at least 50 women down there who are prettier, richer, more—" She gestured vaguely at herself. "More everything." Adrian turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "You want the truth?" "Always. Because you looked at me like I was just a person, not a prize, not a meal ticket, just someone standing across a rooftop." He paused. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Sienna's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him she understood, that she spent most of her life feeling invisible until someone needed something from her, that being seen, really seen, felt like oxygen after drowning. Instead, she said, "I'm nobody. I work temp jobs and can barely afford groceries. Tomorrow I have an interview for a position I'll probably fail at, and if I don't get it, I'm going to lose my apartment. So if you're looking for someone interesting, you picked wrong." Adrian studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "You think that makes you nobody? Doesn't it? It makes you real." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his controlled exterior. "Everyone down there is performing, playing a role. You're the only one who isn't." Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory, the kind of moment that could change everything or mean absolutely nothing. "Adrian," he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was the kind of kiss that erased thoughts, obliterated common sense, made every rational argument dissolve into nothing. His hand cupped her jaw, thumb brushing her cheekbone, and Sienna's entire world narrowed to this. The taste of him, the solid warmth of his body against hers, the way he kissed her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sienna felt like she'd been set on fire and doused in ice water simultaneously. "I shouldn't have done that," Adrian said, but he didn't sound sorry. "No," Sienna agreed. "You really shouldn't have." "Are you going to slap me?" "I'm considering it." His laugh was low, genuine. "Fair." Sienna's hands were shaking. She gripped the railing harder, trying to steady herself. "I don't do this. I don't kiss strangers on rooftops. I don't—" She gestured helplessly between them. "This isn't me." "Maybe it should be." "That's easy for you to say." "You probably do this all the time." Adrian's expression darkened. "You don't know anything about me." "Exactly. That's the problem." They stared at each other, the moment stretching thin and dangerous. Sienna wanted to walk away, wanted to go back downstairs, find Rachel, go home, and pretend this never happened. But her feet wouldn't move. "Tell me something true," she said instead. "Something real." Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I'm tired. Not physically. Just tired of being what everyone expects. Of making decisions that affect thousands of people I'll never meet. Of being alone in rooms full of people." He met her eyes. "Until tonight." Sienna's breath caught. She recognized that exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of playing a role you never auditioned for. "I'm scared," she said, the confession slipping out before she could stop it. "All the time. Scared I'm not good enough. Scared I'll fail at everything that matters. Scared that this—" She gestured at the city. "Is as good as it gets, and I still can't make it work." Adrian's hand found hers on the railing, fingers threading through hers. "You're going to do fine tomorrow." "You don't know that." "I do." "You want to know why?" "Why?" "Because you're here. You're terrified and broke, and one bad day away from disaster, and you're still here, still trying. That's not weakness, Sienna. That's strength." Something in her chest cracked open. Maybe it was the way he said her name. Maybe it was the earnestness in his voice, the lack of platitudes or empty reassurance. Whatever it was, Sienna felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "I should go," she said, her voice unsteady. "Rachel's probably looking for me." Adrian squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "Probably." But neither of them moved. The night stretched around them, the city humming with life below, and for these few stolen moments, nothing else existed. "What company?" Adrian asked suddenly. "What?" "Your interview tomorrow." "What company?" Sienna hesitated. She didn't want to talk about tomorrow, didn't want reality crashing into whatever this fragile thing was between them. But something in his expression made her answer. "Voss Industries. It's this huge corporation that does— honestly, I'm not even sure exactly what they do. Tech, finance, everything?" She laughed self-consciously. "I applied on a whim, never expected to hear back." Adrian went very still. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "What position?" "Executive assistant to the CEO. Like I said, totally out of my league." The silence that followed felt different, heavier. Sienna looked at Adrian and found his expression had closed off. all the warmth from moments ago replaced by something unreadable. "You okay?" she asked. "Fine." He stepped back, creating distance between them. "You should go find your friend." The dismissal stung more than it should have. "Right. Of course." Sienna turned toward the door, confusion and hurt warring in her chest. What had she said? What had changed? "Sienna." She stopped, looked back. Adrian stood in shadow now, his face half hidden. "Good luck tomorrow." There was something in his tone, something that made her skin prickle with unease. But before she could ask, he turned away, facing the city with that same untouchable stillness she'd noticed when she first saw him. Sienna left, winding back through the private door, into the noise and chaos of the rooftop bar. Rachel found her immediately, eyes bright with alcohol and curiosity. "There you are. Where did you disappear to?" "Nowhere. Just needed air." Rachel studied her face, too perceptive for Sienna's liking. "You okay? You look weird." "I'm fine. Can we go?" "Now you want to leave?" "Please, Rach." Something in Sienna's voice must have convinced her because Rachel didn't argue, just grabbed her purse and led them toward the exit. In the elevator down, Sienna caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. Flushed cheeks, smudged lipstick, eyes too bright. She looked like someone who'd just made a terrible mistake, or the best one of her life. She couldn't tell which. Morning came too early and too bright. Sienna woke to her phone alarm screaming and sunlight stabbing through her thin curtains like a personal attack. Her head pounded. Not quite a hangover, but close enough to be annoying. She groaned, silencing the alarm, and lay there staring at her ceiling with its water stain that vaguely resembled Florida. Interview day. The thought cut through the fog of sleep, sharp and unforgiving. She dragged herself out of bed, stumbling toward the bathroom that was barely bigger than a closet. The mirror showed exactly what she expected. Dark circles, tangled hair, the general appearance of someone who'd made questionable decisions the night before. Adrian's face flashed through her mind, unbidden. The kiss. His hand on her waist, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered, then the way he'd shut down the moment she mentioned Voss Industries. Sienna shoved the memory aside. It didn't matter. He was a stranger she'd never see again, a footnote in a night she should probably forget. Today was about survival, about landing this job so she could keep a roof over her head and maybe, possibly, start digging herself out of the hole her life had become. She showered fast, the water never quite reaching a comfortable temperature, and spent 20 minutes on her makeup, covering the evidence of last night as thoroughly as possible. Her interview outfit, a black blazer and matching pants she'd bought at a thrift store, hung on her closet door, pressed and ready. Professional. Capable. Nothing like the girl who'd kissed a stranger on a rooftop and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. By 7:30 she was on the subway, crushed between a man who smelled like onions and a woman reading a romance novel with an extremely inappropriate cover. Sienna gripped the pole, reviewing everything she'd memorized about Voss Industries, founded 15 years ago. Meteoric rise. Tech development, venture capital, real estate. CEO Adrian Voss, 32 years old, notoriously private, appeared in Forbes 30 Under 30 at 23 and hadn't stopped climbing since. No scandals, no controversies, just relentless, terrifying success. The name had felt like a coincidence last night. Adrian wasn't exactly rare, but this morning, with her head clear, unease crept down her spine. No, it couldn't be. What were the odds? The subway screeched to her stop. Sienna exited with the crush of morning commuters, all of them moving with the grim determination of people who'd made peace with their corporate servitude. She followed the GPS on her phone toward Voss Industries headquarters, her heels clicking against pavement that still held puddles from last night's rain. The building was glass and steel, modern and imposing, the kind of architecture designed to make you feel small. Sienna stood outside for a moment, gathering courage. She'd been to plenty of interviews before. This was just another one. Just higher stakes, just potentially life-changing. No pressure. She pushed through the revolving door into a lobby that screamed money. Marble floors, minimalist furniture, a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. The woman behind it was beautiful, in that intimidating, perfectly assembled way that made Sienna immediately aware of every flaw in her own appearance. Sienna Cole, she said, trying to sound confident. I have a 9 o'clock interview. The receptionist smiled with professional warmth that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, 15th floor. Someone will meet you there. The elevator ride up felt endless. Sienna watched the numbers climb. Her reflection multiplied in the mirrored walls. An army of nervous girls in thrift store blazers, all of them pretending to belong. The doors opened to reveal another reception area, this one smaller but equally expensive looking. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit stood waiting. Miss Cole? Yes. I'm Patricia, Mr. Voss's current executive assistant. Follow me. Sienna's stomach dropped. Mr. Voss. Adrian Voss. The CEO. It was a common name, she told herself desperately. Lots of people named Adrian. Didn't mean anything. But her hands were shaking as she followed Patricia down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than Sienna would earn in a decade. They passed offices with glass walls, conference rooms where serious-looking people had serious-looking meetings, all of it humming with the quiet efficiency of serious money. You'll be meeting with Mr. Voss directly, Patricia said without looking back. Normally we do preliminary interviews, but he specifically requested to see you himself. Red flags waved frantically in Sienna's peripheral vision. Is that unusual? Extremely. Consider yourself lucky. Lucky wasn't the word Sienna would have chosen. Doomed, maybe. Cursed. Cosmically screwed. They stopped in front of a door. Solid wood, expensive, with a brass nameplate that read, Adrian Voss, CEO. This couldn't be happening. It was a coincidence. A very improbable, statistically unlikely, universe hates her coincidence. Patricia knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. Ms. Cole for her 9 o'clock, Mr. Voss? Send her in. That voice, low, controlled, devastatingly familiar. Sienna's blood turned to ice. She stepped into the office on legs that felt like they might give out, and her entire world tilted sideways. Because the man behind the massive mahogany desk, the billionaire CEO she was supposed to impress with her professionalism and competence, wasn't a stranger at all. It was Adrian. Her Adrian. The man who'd kissed her like the world was ending 12 hours ago. And from the dangerous glint in his eyes as they met hers, he remembered absolutely everything. The door clicked shut behind Sienna with a finality that felt like a cell locking. Patricia's footsteps retreated down the hallway, leaving nothing but silence and the sound of Sienna's heart trying to break through her rib cage. Adrian didn't stand, didn't smile, just sat there behind his desk looking every inch the billionaire CEO, tailored suit, perfect posture, expression carved from stone. The only indication he was affected at all was the slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers had stopped mid-movement over a folder on his desk. Ms. Cole, he said, his voice professionally neutral. Please, sit. Sienna's legs moved on autopilot, carrying her to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. She sat, spine rigid, hands gripping her resume folder so hard the edges crumpled. Her brain screamed at her to say something, do something, but every word died in her throat. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her with those same dark eyes that had looked at her so differently last night. Like she mattered, like she was more than just another applicant who'd probably bombed this interview spectacularly. I assume you're surprised, he said. Surprised, the understatement of the century. That's one word for it, Sienna managed, her voice coming out steadier than she felt. Would you prefer shocked? Horrified? All of the above. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Then it was gone, replaced by that same impenetrable mask. For what it's worth, Adrian said, I didn't know you'd applied here until I reviewed the interview list this morning. Sienna's stomach dropped. So, last night was a coincidence, a spectacularly inconvenient one, but yes. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or insulted. Part of her had wondered, in the cab ride over, if last night had been some twisted test. Rich men did weird things. But looking at Adrian now, seeing the carefully controlled tension in his shoulders, she believed him, which somehow made everything worse. I should leave, Sienna said, starting to stand. Sit down. It wasn't loud, but the command in his voice made her freeze. She sat, hating herself for obeying, hating him for expecting her to. Adrian opened the folder on his desk. Her application, she realized. He scanned it with the same intensity he'd looked at the city skyline last night, like he was searching for something hidden beneath the surface. Columbia, graduated cum laude, he read aloud. 3 years of administrative experience across 4 different companies. Proficient in 6 different software systems. References describe you as reliable, detail-oriented, and professional. He looked up. Impressive credentials for someone who told me last night she was nobody. Heat crept up Sienna's neck. I wasn't expecting a job interview on a rooftop. No, you were expecting what exactly? Not this. That's not an answer. Sienna's hands tightened on her folder. She'd come here prepared to be professional, to prove she deserved this job despite having no connections and a bank account that made her want to cry. Now she was sitting across from a man who'd seen her vulnerable, reckless, real, in a way she never let potential employers see. I didn't know who you were, she said finally. If I had, you wouldn't have kissed me? The bluntness of it stole her breath. Adrian's expression hadn't changed, but something flickered in his eyes. Challenge, maybe, or curiosity. No, Sienna said. I wouldn't have. Why not? Because this, she gestured between them, at the office, at everything, is complicated enough without adding that to it. So you regret it. Did she? Sienna searched for the right answer, the professional one, but all she could remember was the way his hand had cupped her jaw, the taste of his mouth, the feeling of being completely present in a moment for the first time in months. I didn't say that, she said quietly. Adrian's gaze intensified. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The office felt smaller, the air heavier. Sienna wondered if he could hear her heart hammering, if he knew how badly she wanted to run and how desperately she needed to stay. Tell me why you want this job, Adrian said, breaking the silence. The shift back to professional territory should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like whiplash. The truth? Sienna asked. Always. She'd prepared an answer. Something about career growth and challenging opportunities and being passionate about the industry. All the polished lies people told in interviews to hide the messy reality of needing money to survive. But Adrian had already seen through her once. What was the point in pretending now? Because I'm 3 weeks away from being homeless, Sienna said. Because I have $47,000 in student loans and a degree that apparently qualifies me for nothing. Because every other job I've applied for in the last 2 months has either ignored me or told me I'm overqualified for positions that pay minimum wage. She met his eyes. I need this job. Not want, need. And I'm good enough to do it, even if my resume doesn't look like much compared to whoever else you're interviewing. Adrian didn't react, just watched her with that unreadable expression that made her want to either scream or disappear. What makes you think you can handle working for me? He asked. Honestly, I have no idea, but I've handled worse. Worse than working 70-hour weeks managing the schedule of someone who makes decisions worth billions. I once worked Black Friday at a department store where a woman hit me with her purse over a discounted blender. So yes, I think I can handle you. Adrian's laugh was short, surprised. You hit back. I fantasized about it. Then I smiled and helped her find the customer service desk. That's the job, you know. Smiling when you want to hit someone, staying calm when everything's falling apart, being the only steady thing in a company full of chaos. Sienna straightened. I can do that. Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look about 2 seconds away from running out of this office. He wasn't wrong, but Sienna had spent her entire adult life pretending to be more confident than she felt, more capable than her circumstances suggested. What was one more performance? I'm still here, aren't I? She said. Adrian studied her for another long moment, then stood. He moved to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at Manhattan spread beneath them like a kingdom he'd conquered. Patricia is retiring in 3 weeks, he said. I need someone who can start immediately, learn fast, and handle pressure that would break most people. The hours are long. The work is demanding. You'll see things about this company, about me, that stay confidential, no exceptions. Sienna's pulse quickened. I understand. Do you? Because if you take this job, your life stops being yours. Every call I get at midnight, you get. Every crisis that erupts at 3 in the morning, you handle. Every secret I keep, you keep. He turned to face her. Can you do that? Yes. Even knowing what happened between us last night? There it was. The question hanging between them since she'd walked into this office. Sienna stood, forcing herself to meet his gaze head on. Last night was a mistake. It won't happen again. You're sure about that? Completely. Adrian crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. Suddenly he was close. Too close, invading her space in a way that made her breath catch. He didn't touch her, didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to make her skin feel electric. Liar, he said softly. Sienna's hands clenched at her sides. Excuse me? You're lying. To me, maybe to yourself, but definitely lying. I'm being professional. You're being scared. Same thing in this context. Adrian's smile was sharp, dangerous. Is it? They stood there, inches apart, the tension thick enough to choke on. Sienna could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made her want to lean closer, even as every rational thought screamed at her to step back. If I give you this job, Adrian said, we don't talk about last night. It didn't happen. You're my assistant. I'm your boss, and that's all we are to each other. Understood? Relief and disappointment warred in Sienna's chest. She shoved both down, focusing on the only thing that mattered, survival. Understood, she said. Good. Adrian stepped back, the sudden distance making her feel unsteady. You start Monday. Patricia will train you for 2 weeks, then you're on your own. Salary is $120,000 plus benefits, non-negotiable. Sienna's brain short-circuited. $120,000. That was more than double what she'd been hoping for, enough to pay off her debts and actually save money, and maybe, possibly, stop feeling like she was drowning every second of every day. That's very generous, she managed. It's market rate for what I'm asking you to do. Don't mistake it for generosity. Right, of course, this wasn't kindness. This was business. Adrian returned to his desk, picking up his phone with the clear dismissal of someone who'd already moved on to the next thing. Patricia will handle the paperwork. You're free to go. Sienna should have felt relieved. She'd gotten the job. Against all odds, despite the universe's apparent determination to destroy her, she'd actually gotten the job. So why did she feel like she'd just signed a contract with the devil? Thank you, she said, heading for the door. Sienna. She stopped, looked back. Adrian's expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made her heart skip. Welcome to Voss Industries. The words should have sounded professional. Instead, they sounded like a warning. Sienna left before she could do something stupid like ask what he meant. Patricia was waiting outside, that same professional smile in place. How did it go? She asked. I got the job. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. Well, that was fast. Follow me. We'll get you set up with HR. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of paperwork, building tours, and information overload. Sienna signed contracts, received badges and passwords, got lectured on confidentiality agreements that made her previous ND-as look like permission slips. By the time she finally escaped back to the street, her head was spinning and her hands were shaking. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Her phone buzzed. Rachel. How'd it go? Did you get it? Sienna stared at the message, trying to figure out how to explain that yes, she'd gotten the job, but also her new boss was the stranger she'd kissed last night, and she was pretty sure she'd just walked into a disaster disguised as an opportunity. Got it, she typed back. Start Monday. Holy shit! Drinks tonight to celebrate? Rain check, need to process. You okay? No, not even a little bit. But Sienna had spent enough years pretending that one more lie came easy. Fine, just tired. She pocketed her phone and started walking, no particular destination in mind. The city moved around her, people rushing to meetings, tourists taking photos, delivery guys weaving through traffic. Everyone had somewhere to be, something to do. Everyone fit into the machine of Manhattan except her. Sienna's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This is Adrian, save this number. I'll need you reachable at all times starting Monday. Her stomach flipped. She typed back, How did you get my number? Your application. Save it. Professional, practical. Nothing weird about your new boss having your personal number. Except it felt weird. It felt like a door closing and opening simultaneously, like she'd stepped into something she couldn't fully see the shape of yet. Sienna saved the number, labeling it simply Adrian Voss. Not boss, not Adrian. Just his full name, formal and distant. Another text came through. Good. See you Monday. That was it. No small talk, no acknowledgement of the insanity of their situation. Just blunt efficiency. Sienna shoved her phone in her pocket and kept walking. The weekend passed in a strange fog. Sienna told her landlord she'd have rent by the end of the month, called her student loan servicer to set up a payment plan, bought actual groceries instead of ramen and whatever was on sale. Normal things that should have felt like victories, but instead felt like she was going through someone else's motions. Rachel dragged her out Saturday night, determined to celebrate properly. They went to a different bar. Sienna couldn't stomach the rooftop where this whole mess had started, and Rachel spent 2 hours grilling her about the job. So what's he like? The CEO? Sienna took a long drink of her wine. Intense. Hot intense or scary intense? Both. Definitely both. Professional. Rachel rolled her eyes. That's the most boring answer possible. Come on, give me something. Is he old? Young? Does he yell? Does he have one of those voices that makes you want to record him reading the phone book? Sienna thought about Adrian's voice, low and controlled, saying liar, like he could see straight through her. Her skin prickled. He's fine, she said. It's a good job. That's all that matters. You're being weird. I'm being employed. There's a difference. Rachel studied her with the kind of scrutiny that came from 7 years of friendship. Something happened. What happened? Nothing. I'm just stressed about starting. Liar. The word hit too close to home. Sienna finished her wine in one long swallow. Can we not do this tonight, please? Rachel's expression softened. Okay, but when you're ready to tell me whatever the hell is going on, I'm here. I know, thank you. They changed the subject, talked about Rachel's upcoming promotion and her disaster of a dating life and everything except the things Sienna couldn't stop thinking about. By the time she got home, exhausted and slightly drunk, it was past midnight. She fell into bed still dressed, her phone buzzing on her nightstand. Probably Rachel, checking she'd gotten home safe. But it wasn't Rachel. Couldn't sleep, reviewing your predecessor's files. You have a hell of a learning curve ahead of you. Sienna stared at the message from Adrian, sent at 12:47 a.m. Who worked at almost 1 in the morning on a Saturday? She typed back, should I be worried? Terrified, but you said you could handle it. I can. We'll see. Sienna set down her phone, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. This was her boss, her employer. The man signing her paychecks and holding her financial future in his hands. Not the stranger who'd kissed her like she was the only real thing in a city full of illusions. She needed to remember that. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a storm. Sienna dressed carefully. Pencil skirt, silk blouse, blazer, heels that made her 3 inches taller and significantly less comfortable. She looked like someone who belonged in a corner office at Voss Industries. She felt like a fraud. The building looked different on a Monday, more alive. People streamed through the lobby, everyone moving with purpose, talking into phones and carrying coffee like ammunition. Sienna followed the flow to the elevators, her new badge getting her past security without issue. 15th floor. Patricia was already there, looking impossibly put together for 7:30 in the morning. Right on time, she said approvingly. Come on, let's get started. We have a lot to cover. The next 8 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Patricia walked her through systems, protocols, passwords, and the kind of insider knowledge that couldn't be written in any manual. How Adrian liked his coffee. Black, no sugar, but not from the office pot, only from the place 2 blocks away. How to tell when a meeting was actually important versus corporate theater. Which executives could be put off, and which ones would make her life hell if she didn't respond within 10 minutes. He's exacting, Patricia said during their lunch break, which consisted of eating salads at her desk while fielding calls. But fair, if you do your job well, he'll trust you. If you screw up, he'll let you know exactly once. There won't be a second time. Has he fired many assistants? Sienna asked. Define many. More than 3? Try 7. In 2 years. Sienna's stomach dropped. What did they do wrong? Different things. One couldn't handle the hours. One leaked confidential information to a competitor. One tried to sleep with him. Heat flooded Sienna's face. What happened to her? Fired and blacklisted. Adrian doesn't mix business with anything else. Ever. Patricia gave her a sharp look. That's important to remember. I understand. Do you? Because you're young and well, you have eyes. I've seen how this goes. Don't be stupid. Sienna wanted to defend herself, to say she'd never even consider crossing that line. But the lie wouldn't come. Because she already had crossed it before she knew who he was, and now she had to live in the wreckage of that decision every single day. I'll be professional, she said instead. Patricia nodded, apparently satisfied. Good. Now, let's talk about his calendar. It's a nightmare, and it's your job to make it functional. They spent the afternoon neck-deep in scheduling software, learning the delicate art of fitting 14 hours of meetings into a 12-hour day. Adrian had calls with Tokyo at 6 a.m., meetings in the office until 7 p.m., dinners with investors that ran until midnight. When did he sleep? When did he breathe? He doesn't, Patricia said when Sienna asked. Not really. You'll learn. At 6:30, Patricia's phone rang. She answered, listened, then hung up with a sigh. He wants to see you. Conference room B. Sienna's pulse jumped. Why? Probably to make sure I haven't scared you off yet. Go. Don't keep him waiting. Conference room B was 3 doors down, glass-walled and imposing. Through the transparent walls, Sienna could see Adrian sitting at the head of a long table, reviewing something on his laptop. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and somehow managed to look both exhausted and intensely focused. She knocked. He gestured her in without looking up. Sit. Sienna sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. For a long minute, Adrian kept working, fingers flying across his keyboard. Then he closed the laptop and finally looked at her. Patricia says you're doing well. I'm trying. Trying isn't good enough. Are you doing well or not? Sienna lifted her chin. Yes, I am. Good. He slid a folder across the table. Read this. I need a summary by tomorrow morning. She opened it. Dense legal documents, acquisition proposals, financial projections. At least 60 pages. All of it? She asked. Unless you'd prefer to only do half your job. No, I'll get it done. Adrian stood, gathering his laptop. Anything else you need from me? Yes. An explanation for why he was looking at her like she was a problem he needed to solve instead of a person. A reason to believe this could actually work. No, Sienna said. I'm fine. Then you're dismissed. She left, the folder heavy in her hands, and returned to Patricia's desk. Her desk, she supposed, starting next week. What did he want? Patricia asked. Homework. Patricia laughed. Welcome to Voss Industries. Get used to it. Sienna stayed late, reading through the folder in an empty office while the building slowly emptied around her. The documents were dense, full of jargon she had to look up, but she pushed through, taking notes and highlighting key points. By 9 p.m., her eyes burned and her back ached, but she had a solid summary drafted. Her phone buzzed. Adrian. Still here? How did he know? Sienna looked around the empty office, suddenly aware of how alone she was. Finishing the summary, she typed back. Go home. Finish it there. Almost done. That wasn't a suggestion, Sienna bristled. I can manage my own time. Not anymore. You work for me now. Go home before you burn out on day 1. She wanted to argue, to prove she could handle whatever he threw at her, but her exhaustion was real, and maybe he had a point. Fine. Leaving now. Good. Sienna packed up, taking the folder with her. The subway ride home was mostly empty, just her and a few other late workers who looked as tired as she felt. She climbed the 4 flights to her apartment, unlocked the 3 deadbolts, and collapsed on her couch. Her phone buzzed again. Rachel this time. How was day 1? Sienna stared at the message, trying to summon the energy to respond. How was it? Overwhelming. Confusing. Like trying to learn a new language while running a marathon. Survived, she typed. That's my girl. Proud of you." The words hit harder than they should have. Sienna felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She was fine. She was handling this. She just needed sleep and coffee and maybe a complete personality transplant so she could stop thinking about her boss as anything other than her boss. She forced herself to finish the summary, emailing it to Adrian at 11 p.m. Then she fell into bed, still half-dressed, and dreamed about drowning in documents while Adrian watched from shore, just out of reach. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a haze of learning curves and late nights. Patricia was relentless but patient, drilling her on protocols until Sienna could recite them in her sleep. Adrian was distant, professional, treating her with the same impersonal efficiency he showed everyone else. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like a constant low-grade ache, like she'd lost something she never really had. On Patricia's last day, they went to lunch at a place with white tablecloths and waiters who looked down their noses at Sienna's off-the-rack dress. "You're going to be fine," Patricia said, over wine she'd insisted they order. "Better than fine. You're quick, you don't complain, and you haven't tried to sleep with him." "That's a low bar," Sienna muttered. "You'd be surprised." Patricia leaned back, studying her. "Can I give you some advice?" "Please." "Don't try to figure him out. I spent 5 years working for Adrian, and I still don't know what goes on in his head. He's brilliant, and he's brutal, and he will consume your entire life if you let him." She paused. "Don't let him." Sienna thought about the midnight texts, the impossible deadlines, the way Adrian looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention. "I won't," she said. Patricia smiled sadly. "That's what they all say." Monday morning, Sienna arrived to find her new desk cleared of Patricia's personal items, replaced with her own sparse belongings. A coffee mug, a succulent that would probably die within a month, a framed photo of her and Rachel from college, back when the future still felt full of possibility. Adrian's door was closed. She could see his silhouette through the frosted glass, already on the phone, even though it wasn't yet 8 a.m. Her computer pinged. Calendar invitation for 8:30. Subject line, weekly check-in. Sienna's stomach knotted. First meeting alone with Adrian since she'd started. No Patricia as a buffer, no excuse to hide behind training. She spent the next 20 minutes organizing her desk, answering emails, and trying not to think about how badly this could go. At 8:30 exactly, Adrian's door opened. "Sienna, let's go." She grabbed her tablet and followed him into his office, closing the door behind her. Adrian sat behind his desk, gesturing for her to take the chair across from him. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Fine. Good. Patricia prepared me well." "I'm sure she did." He pulled up something on his computer. "Walk me through my schedule this week." Sienna did, rattling off meetings and calls and the dinner with investors on Thursday that he'd tried to cancel twice. Adrian listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "The merger with Apex Technologies closes Friday," he said when she finished. "I'll need you here late every night this week. Can you manage that?" "Yes." "You're sure? Because once we're in the middle of it, there's no backing out." "I'm sure." Adrian leaned back, studying her with that same intensity that made her feel transparent. "You've been here 2 weeks. Tell me the truth. Are you overwhelmed?" "Yes, constantly. Every single day felt like trying to drink from a fire hose." "I'm managing," Sienna said. "That's not what I asked." "I'm handling it." Still not an answer. Sienna's jaw tightened. "What do you want me to say? That it's hard?" "It is. That I'm learning? I am. That I'm doing my best because I am. And if that's not good enough, then tell me now instead of wasting both our time." Adrian's expression shifted, something like approval crossing his face. "There. That's what I wanted." "What?" "Honesty. Too many people in this building tell me what they think I want to hear. It's useless." He stood, moving to the window. "You're doing well, Sienna. Better than I expected." The compliment shouldn't have mattered. It did anyway. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me. Just keep doing it." He turned to face her. "This week is going to test you. If you can get through it without falling apart, you'll be fine." "And if I can't?" Adrian's smile was sharp. "Then you'll join the other 7. Sienna stood, refusing to be intimidated. "I won't." "We'll see." She left his office, heart pounding, and returned to her desk. The week ahead loomed like a mountain she had to climb in heels and a pencil skirt, but she'd survived worse. She'd survived eviction notices and empty bank accounts and the crushing weight of failure. She could survive this too. Adrian wasn't exaggerating about the week from hell. By Tuesday afternoon, Sienna had fielded 43 phone calls, rescheduled 6 meetings, and consumed enough coffee to fuel a small aircraft. The merger with Apex Technologies had turned into a 3-ring circus of lawyers, accountants, and executives who all seemed to communicate in a language designed specifically to confuse her. "Get Marcus Chen on the line," Adrian said, appearing at her desk without warning. "Tell him if he doesn't sign off on the revised terms by 5, the deal's dead." Sienna's fingers were already flying across her keyboard. "He's in Singapore. It's 3 a.m. there." "I don't care if he's on Mars. Get him." She got him. Marcus Chen sounded exhausted and irritated, but he signed off on the terms with 15 minutes to spare. Adrian didn't thank her, just moved on to the next crisis, the next impossible demand. By Wednesday night, Sienna's desk looked like a war zone. Papers everywhere, 3 empty coffee cups, her heels kicked off under the desk because her feet had staged a revolt around R12. The office had emptied hours ago, just her and Adrian left on the entire floor. She could see him through his office window, still on his phone, pacing like a caged animal. Her computer pinged. Email from Adrian, sent from 20 feet away. "Come in here." Sienna slipped her heels back on, wincing, and crossed to his office. He was off the phone now, standing at his window with his back to her. His jacket was draped over his chair, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looked human for once, tired and real instead of untouchable. "Close the door," he said without turning around. She did, her pulse quickening for reasons she refused to examine. Adrian turned to face her, and something in his expression made her freeze. He looked wrecked, not just tired, but fundamentally exhausted in a way that went beyond missed sleep. "You should go home," he said. "So should you." "I asked first." Sienna crossed her arms. "I'm not leaving while you're still here." "Why not?" "Because if something comes up, you'll need me. That's the job, right? Being available when everything's falling apart." Adrian's jaw tightened. "It's almost midnight. I'm aware." "You've been here since 7 this morning." "So have you." They stared at each other, neither willing to back down. The office felt smaller suddenly, the air charged with something Sienna didn't want to name. "You're stubborn," Adrian said finally. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It is when it means you don't know when to quit." "Funny, coming from you." Adrian's laugh was short, humorless. "Fair point." He moved to his desk, pulling out a bottle of scotch from the bottom drawer and 2 glasses. "Drink?" Sienna should have said no, should have maintained professional distance, kept the lines clear, but she was exhausted and her defenses were shot, and honestly she wanted to know what it felt like to just talk to him without the weight of their respective roles crushing every word. "1," she said. He poured, handed her a glass. The scotch was smooth, expensive, burning warm down her throat. They stood on opposite sides of his desk, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind them like a reminder of everything at stake. "Can I ask you something?" Sienna said. "Depends on the question." "Why do you do this? Work yourself to death, I mean. You have more money than anyone could spend in 10 lifetimes. You could retire tomorrow and live like a king, so why?" Adrian took a long drink, considering. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Because if I stop, I have to think about everything else. And I'd rather not." The honesty of it hit her square in the chest. She recognized that impulse, the desperate need to stay busy so the silence couldn't catch up. "Everything else like what?" she asked. "You first. Why are you really here? And don't give me the line about student loans. There's more to it than that." Sienna looked into her glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. She'd spent so long building walls, keeping people at arm's length. But standing here in this quiet office with a man who saw through her anyway, the truth slipped out easier than it should have. "I wanted to prove I wasn't a failure," she said. "My parents paid for Columbia, sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities they never did. And what did I do with it? Bounced between jobs that went nowhere, racked up debt, ended up 1 bad month away from living in my car." She met his eyes. "This job, It's my last shot at proving their sacrifice meant something, that I'm not just another entitled millennial who can't hack it in the real world. Adrian set down his glass. You know that's not true, right? About being a failure? Do I? Because from where I'm standing, my track record speaks for itself. Your track record shows someone who keeps getting up every time they get knocked down. That's not failure. That's survival. The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and unexpected. Sienna blinked against the sudden burn behind her eyes, refusing to cry in front of her boss. Not now. Not ever. Your turn, she said, voice rough. What are you running from? Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the window, hands in his pockets, and spoke to the city instead of to her. Expectations. Legacy. The fact that my father built this company from nothing, and everyone's waiting for me to destroy it. He paused. The fact that some days I want to. Sienna's breath caught. What? You think I enjoy this? The constant pressure, the endless decisions, knowing that one wrong move could sink thousands of jobs, billions in investments. I didn't choose this life. I inherited it, and I'm too much of a coward to walk away. That's not cowardice. That's responsibility. Is it? Or is it just fear dressed up as duty? Sienna joined him at the window, standing close enough to see his reflection in the glass. Maybe both. Maybe it doesn't matter as long as you keep showing up. Adrian turned his head, and suddenly they were face to face, inches apart. The air shifted, that same electric tension from the rooftop crackling between them. His eyes dropped to her mouth, then back up, and Sienna's heart stuttered in her chest. We shouldn't, she whispered. I know. This is a terrible idea. I know. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched, taut and dangerous, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then Adrian's phone rang, shattering the spell. He stepped back, answering with a curt Voss. His expression shifted from open to closed in seconds, the walls slamming back into place. Yes, I'll handle it. Give me 20 minutes. He hung up, already moving toward his desk. That was legal. Problem with the Apex contracts. I need to go down there. I'll come with you. No, go home. Get some sleep. Adrian, that's an order, Sienna. The use of her first name, the hard edge in his voice, it was a deliberate boundary, a reminder of who they were to each other. Sienna felt it like a slap. Fine, she said, setting down her glass harder than necessary. See you tomorrow. She left without looking back, grabbing her bag and coat, and getting out before she could do something stupid like cry or scream or demand to know why he kept pulling her close just to push her away. The subway ride home was a blur. Her apartment was dark and cold and exactly as lonely as she'd left it 17 hours ago. Sienna collapsed on her couch, still in her work clothes, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back all day. Frustration, exhaustion, confusion, and underneath it all, a want so intense it scared her. She wanted Adrian Voss, not the CEO, not the billionaire, but the man who looked at the city like it was a cage, the one who worked himself to exhaustion to avoid thinking, the one who'd looked at her like she mattered just for a moment before remembering all the reasons she couldn't. Her phone buzzed. Adrian. Made it home. Sienna stared at the message, torn between ignoring it and throwing her phone across the room. Yes, she typed back. Good. Take tomorrow morning off. Come in at noon. I'm fine. That wasn't a request. Of course it wasn't. Nothing with him ever was. Fine. See you at noon. She didn't get a response. Didn't expect one. Sienna set her phone face down on the coffee table and closed her eyes, trying not to think about the way Adrian had looked at her, the way his voice had cracked when he'd talked about wanting to walk away from everything, trying not to think about how badly she wanted to be the reason he stayed. Thursday morning, Sienna slept until 10, a luxury she hadn't experienced in weeks. She woke feeling almost human, made actual breakfast instead of inhaling a granola bar on the subway, and arrived at the office at noon feeling like she could actually handle whatever came next. Adrian's door was closed, voices audible inside. Sienna settled at her desk, diving into the mountain of emails that had accumulated overnight. An hour passed, then 2. The voices in Adrian's office got louder, more heated. The door finally opened. 3 men in expensive suits filed out, their expressions ranging from irritated to furious. Adrian followed, his face a mask of cold control. "Mr. Voss, this is unacceptable," one of them said. "The board will hear about this." "I'm counting on it," Adrian replied. "Now get out of my office." They left, muttering threats that Adrian ignored completely. He stood in his doorway watching them go, then turned to Sienna. "Conference room, now." She followed him down the hall, her stomach knotting. In the conference room, Adrian closed the door and immediately loosened his tie like it was strangling him. "What happened?" Sienna asked. "The Apex deal is dead." Her heart sank. "What? Why?" "Because their CFO is an idiot and their board is worse. They wanted terms that would have gutted our leverage completely. I told them no." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You should have seen their faces. Like I'd committed treason by having a spine. What does this mean for the company? Short term? We take a hit, stock will drop, investors will panic, and I'll spend the next week explaining why I walked away from a 9-figure deal." He met her eyes. "Long term? We're better off. That merger would have destroyed us slowly instead of quickly. I chose the faster option." Sienna sank into a chair. "Your father built this company, and you just saved it?" "Yes." Adrian's voice was hard. "My father made brilliant deals and terrible mistakes. I learned from both. Sometimes the best decision is knowing when to walk away. Even if everyone thinks you're wrong, especially then." The conviction in his voice was absolute. Sienna found herself believing him, even though the fallout would probably be catastrophic. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Adrian pulled out his phone. "Draft a statement for the press. Conference call with the board in 2 hours. And coffee. Lots of coffee." They spent the rest of the afternoon in crisis mode. Sienna fielded angry calls from investors, scheduled emergency meetings, and drafted 6 versions of a press statement before Adrian was satisfied. The board conference call was brutal. 2 hours of Adrian defending his decision against men who questioned everything from his judgment to his competence. He never wavered, never backed down, just presented his case with the kind of cold precision that made it clear he'd already wargamed every argument they could throw at him. By the time he hung up, it was after 7. Sienna brought him coffee, his 4th of the day, and found him staring at his computer screen with an expression that looked dangerously close to defeat. "They're calling for a vote of no confidence," he said without looking up. Sienna's stomach dropped. "Can they do that?" "If they get enough board members on their side, yes. They can remove me as CEO. Replace me with someone more agreeable." "That's insane. You just saved the company." "I killed their profit margins. In their eyes, that's worse." "So what do you do?" Adrian finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes made her chest ache. "I fight or I walk away. Haven't decided which yet." Sienna set down the coffee and crossed her arms. "You're not walking away." You sound very sure about that." "Because I am. You said it yourself. You're too much of a coward to quit, which means you're going to dig in and make them regret even trying to push you out." Adrian's laugh was surprised, genuine. "Is that your professional assessment?" "That's my personal one. Professionally, I'd say walking away would be the worst mistake of your life, and you're smarter than that." "And if I'm not? If I'm just tired of fighting and ready to let someone else deal with this mess?" Sienna leaned against the desk, meeting his gaze head on. "Then you wouldn't have spent the last 6 hours proving them wrong. You'd have rolled over the second they challenged you, but you didn't. You fought, because that's what you do." Adrian stood, closing the distance between them until Sienna had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. He was too close, invading her space the way he had in his office that first day. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "You have a lot of faith in someone you barely know," he said quietly. "I know enough." "Do you?" "Because most people who work for me think I'm a machine, cold, calculating, inhuman. You've heard the rumors." She had. Ice King, robot, the CEO who fired people via email and never smiled. "I think people see what they expect to see," Sienna said, "and you let them because it's easier than showing them the truth." "Which is?" "That you care too much. About this company, about the people who depend on it, about doing the right thing even when it costs you everything." She paused. "That's not weakness. That's what makes you dangerous." Something shifted in Adrian's expression. the mask cracking to reveal the man underneath. He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in an echo of that night on the rooftop. His fingers lingered against her jaw. "You're dangerous too," he said, voice rough. "You know that?" Sienna's breath caught. "How?" "Because you make me want things I can't have." The confession hung between them, raw and honest and completely devastating. Sienna's pulse pounded in her ears. She should step back, should reinforce the boundaries, should do literally anything except lean into his touch like she was starving for it. "Adrian?" His phone rang. Again. Of course it did. Adrian dropped his hand, the moment shattering. He answered, his voice instantly professional. "Voss? Yes, tomorrow at 9. I'll be there." He hung up, running a hand through his hair. When he looked at Sienna again, the walls were back, solid and impenetrable. "Go home," he said. "It's barely 7. I need to think. Can't do that with you here." The words stung more than they should have. Sienna grabbed her bag, jaw tight. "Fine. See you tomorrow." "Sienna." She stopped at the door, didn't turn around. "Thank you," Adrian said. "For today. For believing in me when you probably shouldn't." Sienna looked back at him, this powerful man who carried the weight of thousands of lives on his shoulders and refused to let anyone see it breaking him. "You're welcome," she said softly, and left before she could do something irreversible like tell him she'd believe in him even if the whole world turned against him. Friday brought the gala. Sienna had almost forgotten about it. Some charity event Adrian was required to attend, black tie and unbearably fancy. Patricia had added it to his calendar weeks ago with a note that read, "Bring date or face consequences from PR." Adrian had ignored the suggestion. Until now. "I need you there," he said Friday morning, appearing at her desk with 2 cups of coffee like a peace offering. Sienna looked up from her computer. "At the gala?" "Yes." "As your assistant?" "As my date." She nearly choked on her coffee. "What?" "PR insists I bring someone. Everyone else I could ask would see it as an opportunity to leverage. You're the only person I can trust not to use it against me." "That's the most romantic invitation I've ever received." Adrian's mouth quirked. "I'm not trying to be romantic. I'm trying to be practical." "What if I say no? Then I show up alone and spend the entire night dodging questions about why I'm undateable. Your choice." Sienna should say no. This was a terrible idea on every possible level. But Adrian was looking at her with something close to hope, and she was weak enough to want to help him even when it meant wading deeper into dangerous territory. "Fine," she said, "but I don't have anything to wear to something like that." Adrian pulled out his wallet, extracting a credit card. "Fix that. Send me the receipt. I'm not using your money to buy a dress. It's a work expense. You're doing me a favor." "Adrian, please." The single word, quiet and sincere, demolished every argument she had. Sienna took the card, their fingers brushing. The contact sent electricity up her arm. "Thank you," Adrian said, and disappeared back into his office before she could change her mind. Sienna stared at the credit card in her hand, then at the gala details on her screen. 8 p.m. The Plaza. Manhattan's elite gathering to throw money at a cause they'd forget about by morning. She was so screwed. Rachel, when Sienna called her in a panic during lunch, was absolutely no help. "Let me get this straight," Rachel said, her voice gleeful. "Your hot billionaire boss just asked you to be his date to a gala?" "It's not like that. It's a work thing." "A work thing where you show up on his arm in a fancy dress?" "He needs someone he can trust." "Right. And you just happen to be the only trustworthy person in his entire orbit." "Sure," Sienna groaned. "I need help finding a dress, not commentary on my life choices." "Those 2 things are not mutually exclusive. Come on, I'll meet you at Bergdorf's in an hour." An hour later, Sienna stood in a dressing room surrounded by dresses that cost more than her monthly rent, feeling like an imposter who'd wandered into someone else's life. "Try the blue one," Rachel called from outside. Sienna pulled it on, midnight blue silk that clung in all the right places and flowed everywhere else. When she stepped out, Rachel's eyes went wide. "Oh, he's going to lose his mind." "That's not the goal." "Maybe not yours." Rachel circled her, adjusting the dress. "But trust me, that man is already halfway gone. This will finish the job." "There's nothing between us." Keep telling yourself that. Sienna bought the dress, or rather, charged it to Adrian's card with a wince at the price tag. Then she bought shoes, had her hair and makeup professionally done because Rachel insisted, and by the time 8 p.m. rolled around, she looked like someone who belonged at a gala. She felt like she was wearing a costume. The car Adrian sent picked her up at 7:30. Black, sleek, probably cost more than her college education. The driver held the door, and Sienna slid inside feeling ridiculous and terrified and a little bit exhilarated. Adrian was waiting outside the plaza, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Black tuxedo, perfect posture, the kind of presence that made people stop and stare. He turned when her car pulled up, and Sienna watched his expression shift when he saw her. Watched his eyes track from her face down to her dress and back up, something dark and hungry flashing across his features before he locked it down. "You look—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "Good. You look good." "So do you." Understatement of the century. He looked devastating. Adrian offered his arm. "Ready?" Not even close. But Sienna took his arm anyway, letting him lead her into the lion's den with a smile plastered on her face and her heart trying to escape her chest. The ballroom was exactly as obscene as she'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, women in jewels worth more than small countries. Everyone turned when they entered, eyes tracking them with the kind of interest that made Sienna's skin crawl. "They're staring," she whispered. "Let them," Adrian said. "You're with me. That makes you untouchable. Or a target." His hand covered hers on his arm. "I won't let anything happen to you." The conviction in his voice made her believe him. Adrian guided her through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and exchange pleasantries with people whose names Sienna immediately forgot. He introduced her simply as Sienna. No title, no explanation. Just her name, like it was enough. An hour in, she'd consumed 2 glasses of champagne and fielded approximately 30 invasive questions about how she knew Adrian. She deflected them all with variations of "we work together," which satisfied no one, but at least wasn't a lie. "Having fun?" Adrian asked during a rare moment alone. "Define fun." "Hating every second but hiding it well," Sienna laughed. "Then yes, loads." The music shifted, something slower. Couples drifted toward the dance floor, moving in that practiced way that suggested ballroom lessons and old money. Adrian extended his hand. "Dance with me." "I don't know how to dance to this." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out." It felt like an echo of that first night, him asking her to dance despite neither of them knowing how. Sienna took his hand, letting him lead her onto the floor. His hand settled on her waist, warm through the thin silk of her dress. She rested her hand on his shoulder, and they swayed to the music, neither of them quite on beat, but not caring. "Thank you for coming," Adrian said quietly. "I know this isn't easy." "Are you kidding? Free food, expensive champagne, watching rich people pretend to care about charity? This is my dream Friday night." Adrian laughed, the sound low and genuine. "You're terrible at lying." "So are you." They moved in silence for a moment, the music wrapping around them. Sienna was hyper-aware of every point of contact, his hand on her waist, her hand in his, the way their bodies moved together like they'd done this 1,000 times. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always." "That night on the rooftop, if you'd known who I was, what would you have done differently?" Adrian's expression grew serious. "Everything. I would have walked away the second I saw you." "Why?" "Because I knew even then that you were dangerous, that letting you close was a mistake I couldn't afford to make." His hand tightened on her waist. "I was right. But you hired me anyway. Worst decision of my life. Or the best. Haven't figured out which yet." Sienna's breath caught. They'd stopped moving, standing still while other couples danced around them. The ballroom faded away, the music distant, everything narrowing to just the two of them and the truth hanging between them. "Adrian, there you are!" A woman in red materialized at Adrian's elbow, all perfect teeth and calculated charm. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Adrian stepped back from Sienna, his expression closing off. "Victoria, didn't know you'd be here." "Wouldn't miss it." Victoria's eyes slid to Sienna, assessing and dismissing in one glance. "And who's this?" "Sienna Cole." My assistant. The word felt like a slap. My assistant. Not my date. Not someone who mattered. Just an employee. Sienna felt herself shrink, the armor she'd built cracking. How nice, Victoria purred. Adrian, we need to talk about the Maxwell account. Can you spare a moment? It wasn't a request. Adrian looked at Sienna, something apologetic in his eyes. I'll be right back. Take your time, Sienna said, forcing brightness into her voice. She watched him walk away with Victoria, watched the woman's hand settle possessively on his arm, and felt something crack open in her chest. This was the reality. She was his assistant. He was her boss. Everything else was fantasy, wishful thinking, a kiss that should have stayed on a rooftop and never infected real life. Sienna grabbed another glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downed it, the alcohol burning away the lump in her throat. She'd been stupid to think tonight meant anything. Stupid to let herself want more than professionalism and a paycheck. She was still standing there contemplating a fourth glass when a man approached. Older, silver-haired, expensive suit. You look like you could use rescuing, he said with a smile that was probably meant to be charming. I'm fine. Are you? Because you've been standing alone for 10 minutes watching Adrian Voss ignore you. That's not fine. That's tragic. Sienna bristled. He's not ignoring me. He's working. At a gala? Sweetheart, if he brought you here just to abandon you the moment someone more important showed up, he's not worth your time. The words hit too close to home. Sienna set down her glass. I should go. Or, the man said, you could dance with me and show him exactly what he's missing. Before Sienna could respond, a hand closed around her elbow. She turned to find Adrian beside her, his expression dark and dangerous. She's with me, he said to the silver-haired man, his voice cold enough to freeze. Could have fooled me, the man replied. Looked pretty abandoned from where I was standing. Adrian's grip tightened on Sienna's arm. Walk away, now. The man held up his hand, smirking. Your loss, sweetheart. He disappeared into the crowd. Adrian turned to Sienna, his eyes blazing. We're leaving, he said. What about Victoria? I don't care about Victoria. We're done here. He pulled her through the ballroom, past the staring crowds, out into the night air. Sienna's head spun from champagne and confusion. Adrian's car was waiting. He opened the door, practically shoving her inside before climbing in after her. Drive, he told the driver. The car pulled away from the plaza. Sienna sat as far from Adrian as the back seat allowed, her heart racing. What the hell was that? She demanded. That was me realizing I made a mistake bringing you here. Why? Because someone actually paid attention to me. Adrian's jaw clenched. Because I had to watch men look at you like you were something they could take. Like you weren't. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. This was a mistake. You keep saying that. This. Us. Everything. Maybe you should have thought about that before you kissed me. Before you asked me to work for you. Before you. Her voice cracked. Before you made me care. The confession hung between them, raw and humiliating. Sienna pressed her hand to her mouth, horrified at herself. Adrian stared at her, something breaking across his face. Sienna, forget it. Just forget I said anything. I can't. Try. I can't because I feel the same way. The words stopped her heart. Sienna looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth written all over his face. The same want, the same fear, the same impossible situation. This can't happen, she whispered. I know. You're my boss. I need this job. We can't. Adrian closed the distance between them, his hand cupping her face. I know, but tell me you don't want this and I'll let it go. I'll never bring it up again. We'll go back to how things were. Sienna's throat tightened. She should lie. Should protect herself, protect her job, protect everything she'd worked so hard to build. Instead, she leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. I can't. Can't what? Can't tell you I don't want this. Because I do. I want you so badly it scares me. Adrian's thumb brushed her cheekbone, achingly gentle. Then what do we do? I don't know. They sat there, the car moving through Manhattan, two people caught between wanting and knowing better. Finally, Adrian pulled back, putting distance between them. Monday morning, he said, voice rough. We go back to being professional, boss and assistant. Nothing more. Sienna's chest ached. And tonight? Adrian's eyes met hers, dark and honest. Tonight we're just two people who made a mistake. And maybe that's enough. It wasn't. It would never be enough. But Sienna nodded anyway, because the alternative was admitting she wanted everything he couldn't give her, and that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with no idea how far the fall would be. The car pulled up outside her building. Adrian didn't move to get out. Good night, Sienna, he said. Good night. She climbed out, the night air cold against her skin. Adrian's car pulled away, and Sienna stood there watching until the taillights disappeared, feeling like she'd just lost something she never really had. Monday morning arrived like a prison sentence. Sienna woke to her alarm with a headache that had nothing to do with champagne and everything to do with the fact that she'd barely slept. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she saw Adrian's face in the back of that car, heard his voice saying he felt the same way, felt the ghost of his hand against her cheek. She dressed carefully, choosing her most professional outfit: black pants, white blouse, blazer, armor. She pulled her hair back into a severe bun, applied minimal makeup, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked competent, untouchable. Nothing like the girl in the blue dress who'd slow danced with her boss and confessed feelings that could destroy everything. Perfect. The subway was packed with the Monday morning crush. Sienna wedged herself into a corner, staring at her phone without seeing it, trying to prepare herself for what came next. Professional, distant, boss and assistant. Nothing more. She could do this. She had to. The office felt different when she stepped off the elevator. Or maybe she was different. Either way, the familiar space now felt loaded with landmines, every corner holding a memory she needed to forget. Adrian's door was closed, lights off. His calendar showed an 8 a.m. meeting downtown that would run until at least 11. Relief and disappointment hit her simultaneously. A few hours to collect herself, to rebuild her defenses before facing him. Sienna settled at her desk, diving into emails with the kind of forced focus that came from desperation. She had 43 new messages, most of them routine, a few requiring immediate attention. She answered them methodically, grateful for the distraction. At 9:30, her phone buzzed. Text from Rachel. How was the gala? Need details immediately. Sienna stared at the message, trying to figure out how to explain. She settled for, complicated. We'll call later. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Rachel sent back a string of concerned emojis, but mercifully dropped it. Sienna returned to her emails, forcing herself to think about quarterly reports and scheduling conflicts instead of the way Adrian had looked at her when he'd said he felt the same way. 11 o'clock came and went. No Adrian. His calendar showed he was supposed to be back by now, but his office remained dark and empty. Sienna told herself it didn't matter, that she didn't care, that his whereabouts were none of her business unless they affected his schedule. At 11:30, her phone rang. Adrian. Her heart jumped into her throat. She let it ring twice before answering, trying to sound normal. Sienna Cole. I'm going to be late. His voice was clipped, professional. Meeting ran over. Push my noon call to 2. Of course. Anything else? A pause, long enough that Sienna wondered if he'd hung up, then, no, that's all. The line went dead. Sienna set down her phone, ignoring the way her hands shook. This was good, professional, exactly what they'd agreed on. So why did it feel like drowning? Adrian finally appeared at 1:15, striding past her desk without a word. His door closed with a decisive click. Sienna forced herself not to react, to keep her eyes on her computer screen even though every cell in her body was aware of his presence 20 feet away. 10 minutes later, her computer pinged. Email from Adrian. Come in. We need to talk. Sienna's stomach dropped. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and crossed to his office. Knocked once. Come in. Adrian sat behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking like he'd had exactly as much sleep as she had, which was to say, none. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his jaw tight with exhaustion or stress or both. Close the door, he said. She did, staying near it, maintaining distance. Safe distance. Adrian gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. I'd rather stand. That wasn't a request. Sienna sat, spine rigid, hands folded in her lap, every inch the professional assistant. Adrian studied her for a long moment, and she watched him catalog the changes, the severe hair, the armor-like clothing, the careful blankness of her expression. About Friday night, he started. We don't need to discuss it. Yes, we do. You said Monday we'd go back to being professional. It's Monday. I'm being professional. Adrian's jaw tightened. Is that what this is? The hair, He gestured at her. This whole Ice Queen routine? It's not a routine. It's appropriate workplace behavior. It's bullshit. Sienna's hands clenched in her lap. What do you want from me, Adrian? You said it yourself. We made a mistake. Now we're moving forward. That's what adults do. Adults also acknowledge when something needs to be addressed instead of pretending it didn't happen. Fine. Let's address it. Sienna stood, anger cutting through her careful control. Friday night, we both admitted we have feelings we shouldn't have. Feelings that, if acted on, would destroy my career and complicate your life beyond repair. So we're not acting on them. Problem solved. Can I go now? Adrian stood too, coming around his desk. You think it's that simple? It has to be. Why? Because the alternative is me quitting this job to avoid the constant torture of wanting something I can't have. And I can't afford to quit. So yes, it's that simple. Adrian stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Sienna could see the storm in his eyes. What if I don't want you to quit? Then you need to let this go. Let me go. I'm trying. It's not working. Sienna's throat tightened. Try harder. They stared at each other, the office silent except for the muffled sounds of the city 15 floors below. Sienna felt herself wavering, felt her careful control starting to crack. I should get back to work, she said, her voice barely steady. Sienna, please, don't make this harder than it already is. Adrian's expression crumbled for just a moment, showing the man underneath the CEO mask. Then he stepped back, creating distance. You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. You're right. Sienna nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and left his office before the tears burning behind her eyes could fall. The rest of the day passed in a blur of forced productivity. Sienna answered calls, managed Adrian's calendar, drafted emails, and did everything in her power to avoid being in the same room as him. When they had to interact, she kept it brief and professional, her voice pleasant and empty. By 6 p.m., her face hurt from holding the mask in place. By 7, she wanted to scream. By 8, when Adrian's office light finally went dark and she heard the elevator doors close behind him, she dropped her head into her hands and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back all day. This was impossible. Absolutely, completely impossible. Her phone buzzed. Rachel. Again. Coming over with wine and takeout. Don't argue. Sienna wanted to argue, wanted to be alone with her misery. But she also knew Rachel wouldn't take no for an answer, and honestly, she could use a friend right now. Fine, she typed back. See you at 9. Rachel showed up at 9:15 with Thai food and 2 bottles of wine, took one look at Sienna's face, and pulled her into a hug. Okay, she said, steering Sienna to the couch. Tell me everything. So Sienna did. The whole mess of it, the rooftop, the interview, the job, the gala, the confession in the car. By the time she finished, they'd made a significant dent in the wine, and Rachel was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Let me get this straight, Rachel said. You're in love with your boss. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face. Sienna took a long drink of wine. It doesn't matter how I feel. Nothing can happen. Why not? Because he's my boss, Rachel. Because I need this job. Because workplace relationships are a terrible idea that end in disaster 99% of the time. And the other 1%? Doesn't apply to us. Rachel shook her head. You're scared. Of course I'm scared. I'm one mistake away from losing everything I've worked for. Or one risk away from getting everything you want. Sienna laughed bitterly. That's not how the world works. Not for people like me. People like you? People who don't have safety nets. Who can't afford to gamble on feelings and hope it works out. Sienna set down her wine glass. I've spent my entire adult life one bad month away from disaster. This job is the first stable thing I've had in years. I'm not throwing it away for a man who's probably going to get bored of me the second things get complicated." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "You really think that little of him?" "I think that realistically he's a billionaire CEO and I'm his assistant. We live in completely different worlds. Even if something started between us, it would never last." "So you'd rather be miserable and employed than take a chance on being happy?" "Yes, because at least miserable and employed means I can pay my rent." Rachel looked at her with something like pity. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." Maybe it was, but it was also true. Sienna had learned a long time ago that feelings didn't pay bills and romance didn't keep roofs over heads. Reality was harsh and unforgiving, and the smart move was protecting herself before she got destroyed, even if it felt like dying slowly. The next 2 weeks were torture. Adrian maintained perfect professional distance, treating Sienna with the same impersonal efficiency he showed everyone else. She should have been grateful. Instead, she felt his absence like a physical ache, mourning something they'd never really had. Work became her escape. She threw herself into it with manic focus, staying late, taking on extra projects, making herself indispensable. If she couldn't have Adrian, she could at least prove she deserved this job on her own merits. The board vote on his leadership happened on a Wednesday. Sienna wasn't allowed in the meeting, but she sat at her desk and watched the minutes tick by, her stomach in knots. Adrian had spent the past 2 weeks building his case, meeting with board members individually, presenting data that proved walking away from the Apex deal had been the right call. But would it be enough? 3 hours after the meeting started, Adrian's office door opened. He stood in the doorway, and Sienna searched his face for some indication of how it had gone. He smiled. Small, tired, but real. "They voted to keep me," he said. "Unanimous." Relief crashed through her so intensely her knees went weak. That's amazing. Congratulations." "Couldn't have done it without you. The data packets you compiled, the analysis, you made the case airtight." Sienna felt warmth bloom in her chest at the praise. "Just doing my job." "You're doing more than that. Adrian stopped, seeming to catch himself. "Anyway, thank you." The moment stretched, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Then Adrian stepped back into his office, and the door closed between them again. Sienna sat down, her hands shaking. She was happy for him. Of course she was. He'd fought for his position and won. He deserved it. So why did his victory feel like her loss? That night, Sienna stayed late finishing a report. The office had emptied hours ago, just her and the cleaning crew, who worked their way through the floors after dark. She was deep in spreadsheet hell when her phone buzzed. Adrian. Of course. "Still here?" She looked up. Through his office window, she could see him at his desk, phone in hand, watching her. "Almost done," she typed back. "Come in here." Sienna's heart rate kicked up. She should say no, should finish her work and leave, should maintain the boundaries that were the only thing keeping her sane. Instead, she stood and crossed to his office. Adrian was at his window, looking out at the city. A bottle of scotch sat on his desk, 2 glasses beside it. "Close the door," he said without turning around. She did, weariness prickling down her spine. "What's this about?" "I've been thinking." "About?" "Everything. The board vote, the company, you." Sienna's breath caught. "Adrian, let me finish." He turned to face her, and the expression in his eyes made her chest ache. "These past 2 weeks have been hell. Necessary, probably smart, but hell. And I keep asking myself if this is sustainable. If we can really keep working together while pretending there's nothing between us. We have to. Do we? Because I'm starting to think the pretending is worse than the alternative." Sienna shook her head. "What alternative? There isn't one. You're my boss. I'm your employee. Those are the facts. Facts can change." "How?" "You're not going to stop being CEO. I'm not going to stop needing this job." Adrian crossed to his desk, poured 2 glasses of scotch, handed her one. "What if you didn't work for me anymore?" Sienna's stomach dropped. "Are you firing me?" "What? No, God, no." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I'm saying, so what if we found you a different position? Same company, same salary, but you'd report to someone else. Then we wouldn't have the direct supervisor issue. You want to transfer me? I want to find a solution that doesn't require us to keep pretending we don't care about each other. The words hit her like a physical blow. Sienna set down her glass, her hands shaking too badly to hold it steady. And you think moving me to a different department solves everything? She asked. People would still talk. They'd still say I slept my way into whatever position you put me in. My reputation would be destroyed. Not if we're careful about it. There's no being careful about this. You're Adrian Voss. Everything you do is scrutinized. The second people find out we're... She stopped, couldn't even finish the sentence. It would be a disaster. Adrian moved closer, his voice low and intense. So we let other people's opinions dictate our lives? Let fear keep us apart? Yes, because I've worked too hard to let feelings destroy my career. And you've worked too hard to let a relationship tank your reputation as someone who keeps his personal and professional lives separate. Maybe I don't care about that anymore. Well, I do. I care about being taken seriously, about earning my place instead of having it handed to me because I'm sleeping with the boss. I care about not being the cautionary tale every woman in this building uses to justify why they can't trust men in power. Sienna's voice cracked. I care about protecting myself, even if it means losing you. Adrian stared at her, something breaking across his face. You think being with me would mean losing yourself? I think it would mean becoming someone I don't recognize. Someone who took the easy path instead of earning what she has. There's nothing easy about this. About us. Exactly. So why are we even having this conversation? Adrian closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face. Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because every morning I wake up, and the first thought I have is about you. Because I've spent 2 weeks trying to convince myself I can live with this distance, and I can't. Sienna's eyes burned. Adrian, please don't. I'm in love with you. The words stopped her heart. She stared at him, searching his face for some indication he was lying, exaggerating, anything other than telling the devastating truth. But all she saw was honesty. Raw, painful honesty. You can't be, she whispered. Why not? Because it ruins everything. Or it fixes everything. Depends on how you look at it. Sienna pulled away from his touch, putting distance between them before she did something stupid like kiss him. You don't love me. You love the idea of me. The challenge. The thing you can't have. That's not true. Isn't it? You spend your entire life in control, making calculated decisions, running an empire. And then you meet someone who doesn't fall at your feet, who challenges you, who makes you feel something real for once. Of course you think it's love. But it's not. It's just novelty. Adrian's jaw tightened. You don't get to tell me what I feel. And you don't get to upend my entire life because you've decided you're in love with your assistant. Sienna grabbed her bag, desperate to get out before she fell apart completely. I'm leaving. Don't contact me unless it's work-related. Sienna! She was already out the door, moving fast toward the elevator. Behind her, she heard Adrian's office door open. Sienna, wait! No! She jabbed the elevator button repeatedly, as if that would make it arrive faster. We're done with this conversation. We're not done. Not even close. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. Sienna stepped inside, turning to face him. Adrian stood in the hallway, looking wrecked and furious and desperate all at once. I'll see you tomorrow, she said, her voice barely steady. Professionally? The doors closed on his expression, cutting off whatever he'd been about to say. Sienna made it to the lobby before the tears came. She stumbled out onto the street, the night air cold against her face, and let herself cry. Great gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside her. He loved her. Adrian Voss was in love with her, and it changed absolutely nothing. The next morning, Sienna called in sick. She couldn't face Adrian, couldn't pretend to be professional when her entire world had tilted sideways. She spent the day in bed, ignoring Rachel's texts and staring at her ceiling, trying to figure out how everything had gotten so complicated. Her phone buzzed around noon. Adrian. We need to talk. She deleted the message without responding. Another buzz. Please. Delete. A third. I'm not giving up on this. On us. Sienna turned off her phone and pulled the covers over her head, wishing she could disappear entirely. By Thursday, she couldn't avoid work anymore. She showed up early, hoping to miss Adrian, but his office light was already on when she arrived. Of course it was. The man probably hadn't slept since their argument. She settled at her desk, diving into emails with grim determination. An hour passed. 2. Adrian's door stayed closed. At 10, her computer pinged. Calendar invitation. Subject, review. Sienna stared at it, dread pooling in her stomach. She could decline, could claim she was busy, could do anything except walk into his office and face him. She accepted the invitation. At 10:15, Adrian's door opened. He stood in the doorway looking like he'd aged a year and 2 days. "Come in," he said quietly. Sienna gathered her tablet and followed him inside, closing the door behind her. Adrian gestured to the couch instead of the chairs across from his desk, a deliberate choice to make this less formal. She sat on the far end. He sat on the other, maintaining distance. "I owe you an apology," Adrian said. That wasn't what she'd expected. For what? For putting you in an impossible position, for confessing feelings you didn't ask for pushing when you clearly wanted me to back off. He ran a hand through his hair. "You were right, about everything. This is complicated, and I made it worse by not thinking about how it would affect you." Sienna's throat tightened. "I wasn't exactly fair either. The things I said were true. I do spend my life in control, and you are the first person in years who's made me feel something real." He met her eyes. "But you're wrong about one thing. This isn't novelty. It's not about the challenge. It's about you, who you are, how you see the world, the way you call me out when I'm being an ass, and the way you believe in me even when I don't believe in myself. Adrian, I'm not asking you to change your mind. I understand why you can't be with me. I respect that decision." He paused. "But I need you to know that what I feel is real, and it's not going away just because it's inconvenient." Sienna blinked against the burn behind her eyes. "So what do we do?" "We figure out how to work together without making each other miserable. We set boundaries and actually respect them this time. And we accept that some things aren't meant to happen, no matter how much we want them." It was the mature thing, the smart thing, everything Sienna had been telling herself for weeks. So why did it feel like giving up? "Okay," she said quietly. "We can do that." Adrian nodded, but the sadness in his eyes told her he believed it about as much as she did. They spent the next hour going over his schedule for the following week, falling into the familiar rhythm of work. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like play acting, two people pretending everything was fine while the truth sat between them like a third presence. When Sienna finally left his office, she felt hollowed out, empty in a way she hadn't experienced since those desperate months before landing this job. She'd made the right choice. She knew she had. So why did it feel like the biggest mistake of her life? Friday afternoon, a package arrived at her desk. Small, wrapped in expensive paper with her name written in Adrian's distinctive handwriting. Sienna stared at it, heart pounding. She should return it, should maintain boundaries, should do literally anything except open it. She opened it. Inside was a small velvet box. And inside that, a delicate silver bracelet, simple, elegant, with a single charm. A tiny rooftop. The note said, "For the night that changed everything, even if nothing else can. A." Sienna closed the box with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. It was too much, too beautiful, too painful. She should give it back, should tell Adrian this crossed a line. Instead, she slipped it into her purse and spent the rest of the day pretending her heart wasn't breaking. That weekend, Sienna made a decision. She couldn't keep doing this, working for Adrian, seeing him every day, slowly dying from wanting something she couldn't have. Something had to change. Monday morning, she walked into his office with her resignation letter. Adrian looked up from his computer, saw the envelope in her hand, and went pale. "Don't," he said. "I have to." "No, you don't. We agreed." "We agreed to try being professional. I tried. It's not working." Sienna set the letter on his desk. "This isn't about you. It's about me needing to protect myself. And I can't do that while working for someone I—" She stopped, couldn't finish. "I can't do this anymore." Adrian stood, coming around his desk. "Sienna, please, don't leave like this." Like what? Professionally? With 2 weeks' notice and a recommendation letter request? This is the right way to do it. The right way would be staying, fighting for what we both want instead of running. I'm not running. I'm surviving. There's a difference. Adrian's expression crumbled. What if I told you I'd do it? The transfer. Move you to a different department so we're not in direct reporting. Would you stay then? Sienna shook her head. It wouldn't change anything. People would still talk. I'd still be the woman who got special treatment because she was sleeping with the CEO. You're not sleeping with me. But I want to. And that's the problem. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Adrian's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Sienna thought he might close the distance, might kiss her and damn the consequences. Instead, he stepped back, jaw tight with restraint. 2 weeks, he said, his voice rough. Stay for 2 weeks. Help me find your replacement. Then if you still want to leave, I won't stop you. It was more time in hell, more days of wanting and not having. But Sienna nodded, because she owed him that much. 2 weeks, she agreed. Then I'm done. Adrian picked up her resignation letter, and something in his expression made Sienna's chest ache. He looked defeated in a way she'd never seen before, like she'd taken something essential from him. I'll start the search, he said quietly. Thank you for the notice. Sienna left his office, her eyes burning, and returned to her desk. She had 2 weeks to find her replacement, to wrap up loose ends, to say goodbye to the job that had saved her life and the man who'd stolen her heart. 2 weeks to figure out how to stop loving Adrian Voss. She had no idea how she was going to survive it. The first week of Sienna's notice period felt like living in slow motion. Every morning she woke up knowing she was one day closer to leaving, and every night she went home wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Adrian maintained professional distance, but she caught him watching her sometimes, through the glass walls of his office, across conference rooms during meetings, in the elevator when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Those looks said everything his mouth couldn't. By Wednesday, they'd interviewed 3 candidates for her replacement. All of them were qualified, experienced, perfectly capable. Sienna hated every single one. What did you think of Jennifer? Adrian asked after the 3rd interview, his voice carefully neutral. They were in his office, the door open for once. A deliberate choice to maintain boundaries, probably. She's great, Sienna said, lying through her teeth. Very organized, good with people. But? No but. She'd be perfect for the job. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark eyes that saw too much. You're lying. I'm being professional. You think she talks too much. You notice she interrupted me twice and didn't take notes during the technical discussion about the merger. Sienna's jaw dropped. How did you? Because I know you. I know the way you tap your pen when you're irritated. The way your left eye twitches when someone says something you disagree with. The way you've been doing both things for the past 40 minutes. Heat crept up Sienna's neck. She hated that he could read her so easily. Hated that even now, with everything broken between them, he paid that much attention. Fine, she said. Jennifer's not right. She doesn't listen well enough and she'll miss details. You need someone who can anticipate problems before they happen. Like you. Like anyone competent. Adrian's mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. We have 2 more interviews tomorrow. Maybe one of them will meet your impossibly high standards. They're not impossibly high. They're appropriate for someone running a billion-dollar company. Is that what you tell yourself? That you're just being thorough? Sienna stood, gathering her tablet. I'm trying to make sure whoever replaces me can actually do the job. That's what you're paying me for. I'm paying you to help me find someone, not to sabotage every candidate because you don't want to leave. The accusation hit too close to home. Sienna's hands tightened on her tablet. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? You know what? If you think I'm sabotaging the process, find someone else to conduct the interviews. I have plenty of other work to do. She turned to leave, but Adrian's voice stopped her. Sienna. She looked back, expecting anger. Instead, she found something that looked like resignation. I don't want you to go, he said quietly, but I understand why you have to, so I'm not going to make this harder by pretending your standards are the problem. The problem is that no one's going to be you. and I need to accept that." The honesty of it stole her breath. Sienna stood there, caught between the door and the man who'd somehow become everything she couldn't have, and felt her careful control start to crack. "I should go," she managed. "Yeah, you should." But she didn't move. Neither did he. They stood there in his office with the open door providing the illusion of professionalism, both of them pretending the space between them wasn't charged with everything they weren't saying. Finally, Sienna forced herself to walk away. Each step felt like pulling against gravity, like her body knew she was making a mistake, even if her brain insisted otherwise. Thursday's interviews were worse. The first candidate was too timid, agreeing with everything Adrian said without offering any pushback. The second was too aggressive, treating the interview like a hostile takeover instead of a conversation. By the time the third one started, Sienna wanted to scream. "Maybe we should expand the search," she suggested after they'd wrapped up. "Look outside the company, bring in a recruiting firm." Adrian shook his head. "We have 1 week left. We're running out of time. Then promote from within, someone who already knows the company culture, the systems." "Who do you suggest?" Sienna had thought about this. Marcus from operations. He's detail-oriented, good under pressure, knows how to handle executives. He's also valuable where he is. Moving him would create another gap. So would hiring wrong. If you rush this, you'll end up with someone who either can't handle the job or makes your life harder instead of easier. Adrian rubbed his temples, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "What do you want me to do, Sienna? Cancel your resignation? Beg you to stay?" "I want you to take this seriously. I am taking it seriously. I'm trying to replace someone irreplaceable, and it's impossible, and we both know it." The words hung between them, raw and unfiltered. Sienna's throat tightened. She needed to leave, needed to get out of this office before she did something stupid like cry or change her mind, or tell him she didn't want to go either. "I'll send you Marcus's file," she said. "Look it over. See if he's worth considering." She left before Adrian could respond, retreating to her desk with her heart pounding. This was torture, absolute torture. And she had 6 more days of it. That night, Sienna met Rachel for dinner at their favorite hole-in-the-wall Thai place. Rachel took one look at her face and ordered 2 orders of pad Thai and a bottle of wine. "You look like hell," Rachel said bluntly. "Thanks. Really feeling the love." "I'm serious. When's the last time you slept? Ate something that wasn't coffee?" Sienna picked at her food. "I'm fine." "You're the opposite of fine. You're quitting a job you love because you're in love with your boss and too scared to do anything about it." "That's not... It's more complicated than that." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it's pretty simple. You love him. He loves you. You're both miserable. The only thing stopping you is fear." "It's not just fear, Rachel. It's reality. Workplace relationships don't work, especially not when there's a massive power imbalance. I'd lose all credibility, people would think I slept my way to the top, and when it inevitably falls apart, I'd be left with nothing." Rachel set down her fork. "You know what I think? I'm sure you're going to tell me. I think you're so busy protecting yourself from worst-case scenarios that you're guaranteeing they happen. You think leaving protects you? All it does is make sure you lose both the job and the guy." Sienna's chest tightened. "At least I'd have my self-respect." "Would you, or would you just have regret?" The question hit too hard. Sienna took a long drink of wine, trying to drown the uncomfortable truth Rachel was forcing her to face. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked quietly. "Stay and watch him move on with someone else? Stay and torture myself every day by being close to something I can't have? That's not sustainable. So make it sustainable. Tell him you want to try. Set boundaries, figure out the professional stuff, but at least give it a chance instead of running away." "I'm not running away." Rachel's look was pure skepticism. "Babe, you've been running your whole life from failure, from risk, from anything that might hurt you. And where has it gotten you? Safe and alone. Is that really what you want?" Sienna didn't answer, couldn't answer, because Rachel was right, and acknowledging it meant confronting everything she'd been avoiding. "Think about it," Rachel said, her voice gentler. "You have 6 days left. That's 6 days to decide if you're going to let fear win or if you're finally going to fight for something that matters." Sienna went home that night and pulled out the bracelet Adrian had given her. The tiny rooftop charm caught the light, a reminder of the night everything changed. She fastened it around her wrist, feeling the weight of it settle against her skin. Rachel was right. She'd been running. From her feelings, from risk, from the possibility that maybe, just maybe, some things were worth the gamble. But knowing that and doing something about it were two different things. Friday brought a breakthrough. Marcus agreed to interview for the assistant position, and within 10 minutes, Sienna knew he was the right choice. He asked intelligent questions, pushed back on Adrian's assumptions respectfully, and demonstrated the kind of competence that would make him invaluable. "He's perfect," Sienna said after Marcus left. Adrian nodded slowly. "He is. So you'll offer him the position? If he wants it, he'd be taking a lateral move, same salary, different responsibilities. Might not be appealing. Make it appealing. Offer him a raise, better benefits, whatever it takes, because he's the only candidate who can actually do this job." Adrian studied her, something unreadable in his expression. "You really want to make sure I'm taken care of, don't you? That's what you hired me for. Is it, or is it something else?" Sienna's pulse quickened. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Adrian stood, moving around his desk. "You're trying to protect me. Make sure I'm okay after you leave. But Sienna, I'm not going to be okay. Not for a long time." "You'll be fine. You're Adrian Voss. You survive everything." "Not this. Not losing you." The confession cracked something open in Sienna's chest. She gripped the edge of his desk, needing something solid to hold on to. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't make this harder." "Why not? You're leaving anyway. What do I have to lose by telling you the truth?" "Your dignity? Your professional reputation? Take your pick." Adrian laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think I care about that? I'd burn this entire company to the ground if it meant you'd stay." "Don't say things you don't mean." "I've never meant anything more in my life." Sienna looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth written all over his face. He meant it, every word. Adrian Voss, who'd built an empire on calculated decisions and cold logic, would destroy it all for her. The realization was terrifying and thrilling and absolutely impossible to ignore. "I can't be the reason you lose everything," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't live with that." "Then don't leave. Stay and let me figure out how to make this work. Please, Sienna, just give me a chance." She wanted to. Everything in her screamed to say yes, to take the risk, to believe that somehow they could navigate the impossible and come out whole on the other side. But fear was a powerful thing. It had kept her safe for so long, protecting her from disappointment and heartbreak and failure. Letting it go felt like stepping off a cliff with no idea if there was anything to catch her. "I need time," she said finally. "To think." Adrian nodded, stepping back to give her space. "You have 4 days. That's all the time I can give you. 4 days to decide the rest of her life. 4 days to choose between safety and risk, between protecting herself and fighting for something real." Sienna had never felt more terrified. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and second-guessing. Sienna tried to distract herself, cleaned her apartment, binge-watched terrible reality TV, went for long walks that did nothing to clear her head. But every path her mind took led back to the same place. Adrian. Sunday night, she found herself on the rooftop where they'd met. Someone had propped the door open for a private event, and Sienna slipped through, drawn by some masochistic need to revisit the beginning. The city stretched out below her, exactly as it had that first night. But everything felt different now. She was different. The desperate drowning girl who'd come here looking to forget had been replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd survived and succeeded, and proved she could handle whatever life threw at her. And she'd done it largely because of Adrian. Because he'd believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Because he'd pushed her and challenged her and seen potential she'd been too scared to acknowledge. "Thought I'd find you here." Sienna spun around. Adrian stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking achingly familiar in jeans and a dark jacket. Casual clothes she'd never seen him wear, making him look less like a CEO and more like the man who'd danced with her months ago. "How did you know?" she asked. "Lucky guess. Plus I've been checking every place in Manhattan I could think of. This was number 12. "You've been looking for me?" "All weekend." Adrian moved closer, stopping a few feet away. "I couldn't stop thinking about what I said Friday. About burning everything down. It was too much, too dramatic. I shouldn't have put that kind of pressure on you. Sienna shook her head. You were honest. I asked for honesty. Honesty and emotional manipulation are different things. Is that what you think you were doing? Manipulating me? I don't know. Maybe. I just know I'm desperate enough to say anything if it means you'll stay. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. See? That's the problem. I'm not thinking clearly. Haven't been since the night I met you. Sienna took a step closer. What if that's not a bad thing? What do you mean? You spend your entire life thinking clearly, making logical decisions, running calculations and minimizing risk. And where has it gotten you? Successful and lonely, rich and miserable. Maybe not thinking clearly is exactly what you need. Adrian's jaw tightened. This isn't just about me. It's about you too. Your career, your reputation, everything you've worked for. I know, and I've spent the entire weekend trying to figure out if I'm brave enough to risk it. And? What did you decide? Sienna looked out at the city, gathering courage. I decided that I've been letting fear make my decisions for too long. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of getting hurt. And maybe it's time to let something else guide me instead. Like what? She turned to face him fully. Like wanting something so badly it scares me. Like believing that some risks are worth taking even if they might destroy me. Like trusting that the man I love is worth fighting for, even when everything seems impossible. Adrian went very still. Say that again. Which part? The part where you said you loved me. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. I love you. I've been in love with you since probably that first week, when you stayed at the office until midnight helping me fix a scheduling disaster. And you ordered Thai food, and didn't complain when I accidentally booked you on 3 different continents in the same day. You love me, Adrian repeated like he was testing the words. I do. And it terrifies me. Because loving you means risking everything I've built. But walking away from you? That scares me more. Adrian closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. Tell me you're staying. I'm staying, but we do this right. We set boundaries, we keep work and personal separate as much as possible, and if it starts affecting the company or my credibility, we reevaluate. Done. Anything else? You have to trust me to know when I need space, and I have to trust you to tell me when I'm being stubborn, or scared, or self-sabotaging. I can do that. And we take it slow. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations in front of the board. We figure this out privately before we let the world in. Adrian's smile was slow, genuine, devastating. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about nothing but this. So we're really doing this, you and me? Sienna nodded, feeling lighter than she had in months. We're really doing this. Adrian kissed her then, and it was nothing like that first kiss on this rooftop. That one had been desperate and reckless. 2 strangers seeking escape. This was deliberate, a choice they were both making with eyes wide open. His hands were gentle on her face, his mouth soft and sure. And Sienna felt something inside her settle, like pieces clicking into place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said quietly, in case that wasn't clear. It was pretty clear, but I'm okay with hearing it again. I love you. I'm terrified of screwing this up, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work. Sienna's throat tightened. Even if it means changing how you run the company? Even then. You were right about the transfer. It's the smart move. We keep you as my assistant for now. Start quietly looking for a new role that makes sense for your experience, and when we find it, we make the move look natural. No favoritism, no special treatment, just career progression that happens to solve a problem. You've been thinking about this too. I told you, all weekend, couldn't think about anything else. They stood there on the rooftop, the city alive around them, and Sienna felt something shift. Not fear, not anymore. Just possibility. The terrifying, exhilarating possibility of building something real with someone who saw her completely and loved her anyway. So what happens Monday? She asked. Monday we go to work. I'll have Marcus extend his interview to a full offer. You'll withdraw your resignation with some excuse about reconsidering your career timeline. And we'll start figuring out how to do this without destroying everything we've both worked for. Sounds complicated. It will be, but you're worth complicated. Sienna kissed him again, softer this time. So are you. Monday morning, Sienna walked into Voss Industries with her resignation withdrawn and her heart full of equal parts hope and terror. Adrian was already at his desk when she arrived, and when their eyes met through his office window, the smile he gave her was private, meant only for her. They made it work. Not perfectly. Nothing about their situation was perfect. There were moments when the boundaries blurred, when they had to remind themselves to keep professional distance in front of others. There were late nights when leaving separately felt like torture, and early mornings when arriving at different times seemed ridiculous. But they figured it out. Adrian found Sienna a position in strategic development 3 months later, a role that utilized her skills and removed the direct reporting relationship. People talked, of course. There were whispers about favoritism and speculation about their relationship. But Sienna proved herself through work that spoke louder than gossip, and Adrian made it clear that anyone who questioned her competence could take it up with him directly. 6 months after that night on the rooftop, they went public. Not with fanfare or drama, just a quiet announcement to the board and a simple statement to the press. The reaction was mixed. Some people approved, others thought it was scandalous. Most didn't care as long as the company kept performing. Sienna learned to live with the judgment. It helped that Adrian never flinched, never apologized for choosing her, never made her feel like she had to prove she'd earned her place beside him. He stood with her through every whispered comment and raised eyebrow, making it clear that she wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his partner, his equal, someone who'd earned respect on her own merits. A year after Sienna had almost walked away, they stood on the same rooftop where everything started. Adrian had rented it out for the evening, filled it with lights and flowers, and the kind of understated elegance that was purely him. "What's all this?" Sienna asked, taking in the transformation. "An anniversary, sort of." Adrian took her hand, leading her to the edge where they'd first talked. "1 year ago you almost left, almost walked away from me, from us, from everything we could be. I was scared. You were smart. What we were doing was terrifying and complicated and probably doomed to fail." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Sienna's breath caught. "But you stayed anyway. You took the risk, and you changed my entire life." "Adrian, let me finish." He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, perfect. "I know we said we'd take things slow. I know this probably breaks that rule, but I also know that I don't want to spend another day without you knowing exactly how much you mean to me. So, Sienna Cole, will you marry me?" Sienna looked at the ring, at Adrian's face, at the city spread out below them like a promise. A year ago, she'd been drowning. Now she was flying, and the man who'd helped her find her wings was asking her to build a life with him. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." Adrian slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like joy and promise and coming home. Around them, the city sparkled, indifferent to the two people who'd found each other despite every obstacle. When they finally broke apart, Sienna laughed through her tears. "You know people are going to say you only promoted me so you could propose. Let them talk. We know the truth, which is that you earned every single thing you have, that you're brilliant and capable, and you would have succeeded with or without me. I just got lucky enough to be there for the ride." Sienna rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. "I love you. I love you too, even when you're being stubborn, especially when I'm being stubborn." Fair point. They stood there as the night deepened around them, two imperfect people who'd found something perfect in each other. It hadn't been easy. It probably never would be easy. But they'd learned that easy wasn't the goal, real was. And what they had was as real as it got. Later, much later, when they'd left the rooftop and returned to the apartment they now shared, Sienna found herself thinking about that first night, about the desperate girl who'd come looking for escape and found something better instead, about how fear had almost made her walk away from the best thing that ever happened to her. She'd learned something in the years since, that safety was overrated, that the things worth having were usually the things that scared you most, that love wasn't about finding someone perfect, but finding someone whose imperfections fit with yours in a way that made you both better. Adrian came up behind her at the window, wrapping his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? How different things could have been. If I'd gone home that night instead of staying, if you'd walked away instead of asking me to dance, if either of us had been smart enough to avoid this mess.
You regret it?
Sienna turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become her everything. Not even a little bit. Good, because I don't either. Best mistake I ever made. Falling for your assistant? Falling for you. The assistant part was just inconvenient timing. Sienna kissed him, soft and sure. I'm glad we have terrible timing. Me too. Outside, Manhattan continued its endless rhythm, millions of lives intersecting and diverging in the great chaos of existence. Somewhere in the city, someone else was probably standing on a rooftop, looking for escape or answers or just a moment of peace. Sienna hoped they found what she had, not perfection, but something real, something worth fighting for, something that made all the fear and risk and uncertainty worthwhile. Because in the end, that was what mattered. Not the job title, or the salary, or the public perception. Not the whispers, or the judgment, or the complications. Just this. Two people who'd chosen each other despite every reason not to, who'd built something beautiful out of a chance encounter and refused to let fear destroy it. Sienna had spent her whole life playing it safe, protecting herself from disappointment. And it had left her empty, going through motions without meaning. Adrian had taught her that safety was a cage, that real living meant risking everything for something that mattered. She'd taken the risk, and she'd won. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. There were still hard days, still moments when the complications of their relationship felt overwhelming. Still whispers from people who thought she hadn't earned her place, still pressure from a world that wanted to fit them into neat categories that didn't exist. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. Years later, when people asked Sienna how she'd gotten where she was, Executive Vice President of Strategic Development at one of the world's most successful companies, married to a man who loved her completely, she told them the truth. She'd been desperate and broke, and one bad decision away from giving up entirely. She'd kissed a stranger on a rooftop and accidentally fallen in love with her future boss. She'd almost walked away from everything because fear told her it was the smart thing to do. And then she'd chosen to be brave instead. That was the lesson, she thought. Not that love conquered all, or that following your heart guaranteed happiness, but that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the scariest choice was the right one. That protecting yourself from pain meant protecting yourself from joy too. That real connection required risk, and risk required courage, and courage was something you built one terrifying decision at a time. Sienna had built her courage. She'd taken the leap. And when she'd landed, Adrian had been there to catch her. They'd caught each other, really. Two people who'd needed saving and had found salvation in the last place either expected. In the complications and the impossibility and the beautiful mess of loving someone despite every logical reason not to. That night on the rooftop, the first night, the night that changed everything, Sienna had been looking for escape. Instead, she'd found a beginning. A chance. A man who saw her for exactly who she was and loved her anyway. And in choosing him, in choosing them, she'd finally found herself. Not the scared girl playing it safe, not the desperate woman one paycheck from disaster, but someone brave enough to fight for what mattered, strong enough to weather the storms, and wise enough to know that some things, some people, were worth risking everything for. Adrian was her risk, her leap, her choice, and she'd make that choice again every single day for the rest of her life.